Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent. Line's good. Got real close. The hair high, right? Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes,
they have. Welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott, alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Wow, Sean, that was a nice flourish you had there. Usually I'm ready for anything that you throw at me at the beginning of a show, but that one, that was pretty cool.
Trying something a little new. Fire it up here. Season of Champions.
We're in the midst of the Season of Champions, and so why not act like a champion on the microphone?
That's right. So as we are in the midst of the Season of Champions and the Scotties coming up, we'll have our preview for that next week. And the men's fields are taking form. We'll talk about that as we get into the Brier season as well. But we wanted to take a break from the reaction to what's going on out there on tour in these provincial championships in the playdowns, because over the next couple months between the Brier, the Scotties, and the two world championships, we're going to see some big matchups in high leverage positions. So it's all well and good when these teams play out on the cash circuit, some of the slams. Those are fun games. It's good to see. But now this is the time of year where pressure is amped up. You got world championships at stake, national championships at stake, not just in Canada, but they're national championships, ones that are competitive, say the Scottish men's, for instance. Those are big games. Get into the world championships. You're playing for worlds. You're playing for Olympic qualification points now. These are big spots. And we wanted to see or talk about some of the big rivalries that exist in the sport right now. I will concede that this is somewhat Canada-centric based on where we live and the teams that we see all the time, but there's some international ones on here as well. So we have 10 rivalries that we're going to argue, or I'm going to argue, are the biggest in the sport right now. And Scott, we'll see if you agree with my list. Maybe you disagree with some of these. Most of them are team against team. Not all, but most. So, Scott, before we get into the list here, what do you look for in a good curling rivalry?
Well, Sean, first of all, a rivalry has to have both sides winning at a certain point. You can call the Yankees and Red Sox rivals, but until 2004, they weren't really rivals, right? Yeah. So that's important to me, that like both sides have to be somewhat equal footing. The other thing is they have to have played in some big moments, big matches, or have gotten into a dust up somewhere along the way. Yeah. Think Ben Hebert and Richard Hart. Yes. That kind of thing needs to have happened. And then finally they just have to be like very frequent matchups. You can't say it's a rivalry if they've played each other twice.
Sure. Yes, so I completely agree.
Criteria I'm looking for.
All right. So let's go through here the 10 biggest rivalries in the sport in no particular order. Say that off the top. All right. Scott said it was going to have some international content. Let's start with that international content. Bruce Mowat against Ross White. They have played a total of 28 times in big tour events. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Bruce Mowat is well ahead in the head-to-head, 21-7 in their 28 games, but they are 3-3 in their last six, splitting their last six. Last one went to Mowat in the playoffs of the last Grand Slam. But Scott, as we look at the Scottish Championships, this is interesting now.
Yeah, pretty interesting. And this is maybe a bit of that, Yankees Red Sox, where the Yankees were winning all the time, and now maybe it's time for the upstart team to take over this rivalry, or to be at least in a position to call it a rivalry. I think this is a really good call. They're going to be the teams battling for the Scottish Championship for the foreseeable future. Bruce Mowat is still super young. He's not even 30 yet.
He's not 30 yet, no.
And so to call him like the old veteran, it's maybe a bit much. So yeah, this is a really great rivalry and heating up this year. So I think you got this one good.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe too that you look back at the 2018 Olympics and you had Muirhead there, and now Mowat is just, you would think, like clearly the team. But then Ross White comes up and says, "Not so fast, there, Sparky. We're here too." And then you got Team Craik that's hanging out and making the playoffs at a slam and getting into the slams regularly. So Scottish curling, that depth there is really coming through here in 2024.
Yeah, big time.
Not enough for Craik to make the list, but it's worth noting as we head into the Scottish Championships. So let's go over to one that you said volume of games, Scott, and I'll grant you this one doesn't have the volume of games as some of the other ones on this list, but big games.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Anderson, Krista McCarville, only played 10 times. It is split 5-5, but they have played very important games. They've played in the Scotties playoffs in 2017. They played in the playoffs in the 2021 trials. So in 2017, it was Anderson. The 2021 trials, it was McCarville. The 2022 Scotties final, which of course went to Carrie Anderson, and the 2023 Scotties semifinal, also to Carrie Anderson. So over the past 3 calendar years, they have played very big games against each other. And this even split overall, obviously the edge in those big games has gone to Carrie Anderson, but 2 teams that have a tendency here to meet in big spots.
Yeah, and you're right. They do meet in those big games. Do you know off the top of your notes if they played in the round robin at all in those Scotties?
In the 2017 when they did, they missed each other in 2022 and 2023.
Okay, well, this year they will play each other as they're both part of Pool A.
Okay.
He said, yes, the A is the first pool listed. That's the way the alphabet works. Yeah, and that 2022 final in Thunder Bay, with the crowd back a little bit, I guess. Was there a little crowd in Thunder Bay? It wasn't
at the end of the week.
Crowd.
Yeah, a couple people.
So, just a lot of these pressure-filled games. I like this, but you're right. The volume isn't quite there for me to, maybe put this at the top of the list. Yeah. But they always have good games when they play.
Yes, and excuse me, I said the 2017 Scotties was 2016 Scotties. Carrie Anderson won the round robin game there. Krista McCarville won in the playoffs. They played in the pre-trials in 2017. McCarville wins there. At the 2019 Scotties round robin goes to Carrie Anderson. McCarville wins both at the trials, and then the next 3 games, which include 2 Scotties playoffs, have gone to Carrie Anderson. So big spots there between those 2. And we will, as you say, see them in the round robin there in Calgary coming up starting next week. All right, next up on our list of the biggest rivalries in curling. Scott, this one I think goes way under the radar because they don't come to Canada as much as we might like them to. They don't qualify for the slams, so they don't get a lot of TV time. John Schuster against the Canadian fans. This is one of the best. John Schuster in front of Canadian fans on a live mic is incredible. And I want to say, I don't think it's ever disrespectful in either direction, but I will suggest that there is some acrimony both ways, that Schuster can get frustrated with the Canadian fans, and the Canadian fans can get frustrated with John Schuster.
Yeah, I like this, Sean. This is definitely true, and Schuster sort of plays it up a bit.
Oh yeah, he's a showman for sure.
He knows what's going on there, and sort of
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, these fans would cheer anything for this team, whatever." Yeah, it's fun to see him too, though, at like the Continental Cups when they've been ostensibly on his side, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, it seems like he enjoys the cheering and the support." So uh, this is a good one, Sean. A fun natured rivalry.
Yes. Another one, Scott, that I don't know if is always fun natured, but it's a similar vibe here. Going back to Kristen McCarville, another big rivalry in the sport is Kristen McCarville against people who want to monitor schedules and people who want people to go get a lot of CTRS points. Chris McCarville and her team are firm in what their strategy is. They're firm in the number of events they want to play, the way they want to prep for the Northern Ontario Playdowns and the Scotties every year. Rankles some people, it seems.
Yeah, it can. This is one of those teams that people I often hear say, like, "Who are they? What? Why don't they play more?" Like, and I think we've even asked the question, "Why don't they play more?" Because they're obviously good enough
Yeah.
um, to make those kinds of events if they wanted to. But you're right. Their priorities are what they are, and good for them for sticking with it. And then they still come and, like you say, have made the playoffs at the last three Scotties they've been at. So yeah, this one's good, and I take the side of Team McCarville. This one might not meet the
Unsurprisingly.
criteria. Might not meet the criteria, Sean, of having one side winning more than the other side, but
Interesting.
it's definitely rankles some people.
Absolutely, yeah. Some people get really mad at this for whatever reason.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next rivalry. Let's head out to the beautiful province of Alberta and Brendan Botcher against Kevin Cooey. They have played 52 times out on tour. Kevin Cooey, unsurprisingly, has the advantage 34 to 18, given the age difference between the two of them, that a lot of these early games were Cooey with a lot more experience and a stronger team. Although Brendan Botcher did win the first two times they played against each other. What's interesting about this matchup, Scott, is that even though it's in favor of Kevin Cooey by 16 total, you have it's a matchup of runs of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
where Botcher wins the first two, Cooey wins the next four. Botcher gets a win, then Cooey wins three more. You have another stretch where Cooey wins 6 in a row, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, 3 in a row, 6 in a row. Botcher, his stretches are back-to-back wins a couple times, a stretch of 4 in a row through the pandemic season, 3 in a row through the end of 2022 into 2023 last year. So it's sort of like just a game of runs between these two in terms of the matchup overall, which I find very fascinating. Obviously, in favor of Cooey, he's had longer winning streaks against Botcher, but they're not kind of going back and forth with Cooey winning 2, Botcher winning 1, Cooey winning 3, Botcher winning 2. It's like a real momentum shift between the two of them as they go along here.
Yeah, I picking up what you're putting down there, Matty D, with your game of runs. Yeah, this is a good one. This one would have been on anyone's list, I think, given the magnitude of the games in which they played, the high profile of both teams, the fact that Botcher now has players that were on Cooey's team before. So, you've got that aspect baked into it as well. So this is a pretty solid rivalry.
Yeah, I don't know if it's always the greatest TV, just the nature of the two of them as TV characters, the two Skips. But as you say, each of them in their careers have had good teammates who are TV characters.
Yeah, and I think the new team that Botcher's got, I've seen him smile more in the last year, or like laugh, like crack a joke back, and all those kinds of things more than in the 4 years leading up to it.
Yeah, they were featured in John Oliver on his show. He does the segment "And Now This."
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones he did a few years ago was it was around Canada Day, and it was in honor of Canada Day. Here are some polite interactions at the Canadian Men's Curling Championship. And it was Botcher and Gushu that they used the clips of. And one of them for Botcher is him and Darren Molding yelling back and forth on the ice. He says, I think I like hack. And Molding goes, board? And Botcher goes, yeah, board's good. It's just in isolation like that, it's a very entertaining interaction of just polite curlers. Very, very good.
I like
yeah,
that.
it is a different vibe from Brendan Botcher now, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Definitely now. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the women's side and go with another all-Canadian matchup here in terms of the rivalries. There are whispers about in terms of the off-the-ice rivalry in this case, but let's stick to the on the ice because off the ice, it's can't say for sure. That is Jennifer Jones and Rachel Homan. 56 games played between the two of them. It is 30-26 in favor of Rachel Homan. They have had some big games between the two of them. Obviously at Scotties, at trials, on the cash circuit, at Grand Slams. These two players, I would say, Scott, from 14 through the Carrie Anderson era that we all now live in, were the two top teams on the women's side. And when they played each other, it was kind of appointment viewing, especially at a Scotty, especially when they played at the trials. In 2017, they played in the playoffs of the Roar of the Rings. At the they played each other in a bunch of playoffs at the Slams, Canada Cups, Scotties playoffs. Like, just they play each other a lot. And maybe now with Carrie Anderson clearly being the top team in women's curling, it's taken a little bit away in the perception of this rivalry because it's no longer the two top teams in the country, but it is arguably the greatest skip of all time in Canada against somebody who, when it's all said and done, could take that mantle as the greatest skip in Canadian curling history. So it still is, I think, a very good rivalry and a game that when they play each other, TSN Sportsnet probably going to show it.
Yeah, definitely. This is a one that I knew you'd have on your list, and for good reason. The rivalry between these two teams is, as you described, and you're right. That's not going into the off the ice rivalry, which I do think is a real thing, but is more based on conjecture than fact. And so, I get up for these games. Like I like to see these two great teams playing against each other, and I'll admit I cheer for Team Homan because we live in Ontario.
I mean, Jennifer Jones now lives in Ontario.
I know. They're just always great games and fun to watch. A lot of rocks in play, a lot of great shot making. So
for a while there, Scott, Jennifer Jones had more team members living in Ontario than Rachel Homan did.
You're right.
Who says the provincial rules make sense or don't matter or whatever? And in terms of the conjecture, a lot of it is conjecture. Nothing really confirmed anything. And I mean, part of it is when the Continental Cup existed and you looked and they were both there and teams were shifted around and mixed up, just sort of see what the lineups were. And that's part of it. And then just in general, and you'd expect there to be even off the ice, like, I don't think, who knows about if it was any contention or anything, but certainly at the very worst, like friendly rivalries or like frenemies of sorts, like, play each other a lot. We want to beat you, and we're not going to shy away from that because they're both very competitive and they want to beat each other, obviously.
Yeah, there's teams that I like to hang out with and have a drink with, but I want to beat them when I'm on the ice, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Nope. So we'll go to our next one, Scott. Back to the men's team. We're actually going to go back to Kevin Cooey. And for as much as Brendan Botcher is a rival of Mr. Cooey, nobody, and I mean nobody, is a greater nemesis to Kevin Cooey throughout the course of his career than that pesky, ever-present clock operator who insists on running the time clock when Kevin Cooey is going through his strategy. I know that the clock is necessary. I love the clock. I want it to a certain extent at the recreational level, but I know it's a running joke if Kevin Cooey is always going to throw his last rock as time expires and is going to make that shot. But Kevin Cooey against the clock, every event, a lot of big shots, it's just there. It's just this ever-present thing over his shoulder. And now that the time clocks are visible on the scoreboards, whereas with the old analog scoreboards, we as the audience didn't see the time clock because it was up in the sort of on the scores booth above the media bench. Now we can see it through every end and really see how far behind he gets over the course of the game. And it's, I don't know, Cooey against the clock is just a beautiful rivalry.
Yeah, Sean, this might be your best one yet. It's ever present. Both sides have won at times. We've seen, him get burned by the clock before, and it happens every game. So you're checking all those boxes. I've operated a score clock a time or two in my life, and I'd be terrified to be doing Cooey's clock. Just woof. That's a lot of pressure. You got to be really on the ball. And yeah, this is a good rivalry. I like this one.
All right, Scott, let's go over to the former Pacific Asia Championship region and back to the women's side. And this was hard in terms of picking a singular team. So I'm going with Fujisawa Satsuki against Korea in general, but specifically Kim Eun-ji and Kim Eun-jun. And between those two teams, it's sort of the primary ones that she's playing a lot on tour, especially like Team Gim, Team Kim are in most of the slams now, if not all the slams. Team Gim was at the Pan Continental this year, for instance. So you're seeing them a lot. Fujisawa was in the final of the Pan Continental both years, against Team Korea both years. So against Team Gim, she is 7-6 overall, but Team Gim has won the last 5 of those games, including both at the Pan Continental Championship this year. And against Team Kim has the advantage, 13-12 overall. Team Kim won at the Olympics there in 2022. They split in 2018 at the Olympic Games there, but Team Kim won in the playoffs in that incredible run that they were on. The Pacific Asia Curling Championship 2017 played 3 times. Team Kim wins them all, but for Team Fujisawa, won both at the Olympic qualification event to get to the Winter Olympics there in Beijing. The PAC in 2016, a couple big games, the women's masters in Basel, that event. And that rivalry goes back to 2012. So overall, Scott, between Team Kim, Team Gim, Fujisawa has had some really good games over a long period of time against the Korean champions, or the team representing Korea. Now with the slams, with both of them getting there, just a lot of really good games between Fujisawa and the Korean teams.
Yeah, this hits all the boxes too. Maybe cheating a bit to have it between 3 teams, but no, you're right. Team Fujisawa against Korea, always a good game, and especially lately, it seems to be that the Koreans maybe have passed Japan, but it's quality opponents on both sides. Always going to make for a good game.
All right, last one here. I would say the best rivalry in both the men's and the women's side across the world right now. Let's go into the men's side, Scott. It's going to be Brad Gushue against Nicholas Edin. This is a 27-16 advantage for Brad Gushu. When you look at the World Championships and Olympics that they have played in, Gushu has the advantage 5-4 across the Olympic Games and the World Championships, with Gushu having a 3-2 playoff advantage in those. Now, that is boosted by the fact that in 2017 it was still a page, and Gushu won 2 playoff games against Nicodine that year. So overall, they've eliminated each other from 2 events each in the playoffs. But just a really good rivalry here. A lot of those early games on tour, Nicodine is getting his footing. So if you look at lately, it's a lot more even. But in those 43 games, a lot of big games between these teams, both Olympics, Worlds, and in slams.
Yeah, this one has to be on the list, Sean, when you go talk about the rivalries in curling nowadays, especially given their history, as you mentioned, at the World Championships in the playoffs. Those are, for a few years, it was kind of a given, right? Yeah. That Adine and Gushu, if they were there, they'd meet in the final. So yeah,
and they did. Yeah,
and yeah, they did.
We would do previews and be like, "That's the final."
Yeah,
see you next week, everybody.
Why it was a given, right? And that's why at the Worlds this year, when they were here in Ottawa, it was so surprising to see Sweden just dispatched easily without playing Gushu in the playoffs. And I thought, oh, or did they play in the playoffs?
They did play in the playoffs. I believe it was the quarterfinal, and Gushu won, as you said, but relatively easily. It wasn't.
Yeah, when it was, because it was Gushu was like 4 and Adine was 5 or something. Yeah, and you were like, it's very strange for them to be meeting this early in the playoffs. Like, we're not going to see them in the finals. Like, that's strange. So maybe a bit of a shift towards those Scottish teams that you mentioned at the beginning. But yeah, these two teams definitely still have a great rivalry. And I look forward to seeing it again throughout the year on tour and hopefully, or maybe at the Worlds.
Yeah, so it was the quarterfinals there last year, and 9-1 Brad Gushu wins in that game. So,
and it was shocking that they were playing early, but also that it ended up being so easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they played twice so far this year and have split. One at the Coyote National and one at the Japanese event that they both played in early December. So we will potentially see them again. We'll see. Gushu would have to win the Brier to get another World Championship game, and pools for the Players Championship. Who knows? So we might not get them again this year, but we'll see.
We'll see.
And the best rivalry in the sport, Gushu against Returnaz. But it's sort of just an interesting note here, because I was going through a bunch of these matchups. Scott, Joel Returnaz beat Brad Gushu in 2006 at the Winter Olympic Games.
Hold on. What?
I know. Breaking news.
Hadn't heard that before.
That happened in, as I said, 2006. That's almost 18 years ago. We're like, a week away from that, the 18th anniversary of that. In the 18 years since, they have played 10 times, the two of them. How many of those games do you think Joel Returnaz has won?
Well, I would say of those 10 games, probably 5 of them have been this year, or 4 have been this year, and I'd say Returnaz has won them all. So give me like 6 for Returnaz.
Okay, that's high, Scott. I can tell you that in those 10 games over these nearly 18 years, Joel Returnaz has won as many games against Brad Gushu as you and I.
Wow. Over.
They actually have not played this season. So sort of curiously enough, they have not matched up. They played last year, obviously, the World Championship. Brad Gushu won. They played in the Champions Cup, won that.
Okay.
Yeah, very strange that...
So this one isn't on your list. This is a bonus one,
right?
It's not
on the list. Yeah, that was just a bonus one that I thought that's interesting. We talk about that one game a lot because it is fun, but it's less fun now because Joel Returnaz and these guys are really good. Italy in 2024, not Italy in 2006.
No,
So,
and I would have said doesn't qualify because not enough games and not enough even split of the games.
sure. Yeah. Although
But
you thought it
interesting.
would be an even split.
I did. I thought they would have played more this year. I guess that shows you how much slams I'm watching.
All right. Well, let's go to the biggest rivalry, top rivalry in the sport right now. I think anybody could have predicted that I was going to go in this direction. It is Savannah Tiranzoni and Anna Hasselberg. They have played 57 times in their illustrious careers. Tiranzoni has the advantage 31-26. She has won the last 4 matchups between these two, 7 of the last 9 to take that advantage over the last just under 2 years, starting at the World Championships in 2022, where she beat Anna Hasselberg twice at that event, and then won the game at the Euros in 2022, beat her twice at the Worlds last year as well. They've only played once so far this season at the Women's Masters event there in Basel. But Scott, these two teams play a lot. They split their games. They play in big games. You got the Euros, obviously the World Championships, as I mentioned. They have played in the playoffs of the World Championships in 2019, in 2022, and in 2023. So they are seeing each other a lot. They also played each other in the playoffs of the Olympic Games in Beijing in 2022, the National in 2021, the Curling World Cup. They just see each other a lot in big spots, Scott. And it's always fun to see. Hasselberg hasn't been able to get over the top at the World Championships, but Tiranzoni wasn't able to get over the Hasselberg bump at the Olympics. So I think this is, without doubt, the best rivalry in the sport as we sit here in February 2024.
Yeah, this is the first one that I would have written down, or that I thought of even when we talked about doing this episode. I was like, well, that's the one, right? They've both been in the top 5 in the world basically for the last 6 years straight. Just dynamite teams, always fun to watch their games. Their games have come down to like last end shots at times, that have been pretty iconic. So yeah, this one, slam dunk, no brainer, best rivalry in the world right now.
All right, so there you have it. Our 10 biggest rivalries in the sport of curling right now, February 2024. Scott, what do you think of that list?
I like that list, Sean. I like a couple fun ones, that maybe don't qualify under the rubric I outlined at the top, but fun nonetheless.
All right, so again, just to recap, we got Bruce Mout against Ross White, Gushu against Adine, Cooey against the Clock, Cooey against Botcher, Tiranzoni, Hasselberg, Jones, Homan, Schuster, and the Canadian fans, Fujisawa against Korea, McCarville against the schedule purists, the point chasers, and Carrie Anderson and Krista McCarville as your top rivalries in the sport. Do you agree with that list? Do you like those rivalries? Did we miss any out? Certainly do reach out and let us know. And you can do that on the socials at Game of Stones Pod. Email gameofstonespodcast@gmail.com. Find us over at gameofstonespod.com. Past episodes plus the merch, all there. And of course, if you have not yet, please do subscribe to the show wherever it is you get your podcasts. Likes, rates, comments, all that good stuff helps us out. So Scott, we will see some of these games coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your biggest rival in curling?
My biggest rival is our former skip that has fled the city for fear of playing against me again. We played Chris last year, our first game that we played against him. I really wanted to win. I won't deny it. I've had a great time playing with Chris. I really like him, but I just wanted to win and
Sure.
show him a bit.
Yeah.
But we didn't. And like I say, now he's moved away, so he's just scared to play us. We beat his old team a couple weeks ago.
Not the same
without him, and it just wasn't the same. So, how about you, Sean? Who's your biggest rival?
Anyone who cleans their rock after the shot is called. Basically,
You're in
anyone who does that. Yeah, that's probably it. There was Ray Pollock. I don't know if you consider me a rival, but I never really liked playing against Ray Pollock, and he older guy. He was retired, and he it was what it was. But beat him once in the club championship. The one run I went on in a club championship skipping, and beat him in a quarterfinal game, and he never spoke to me again. And that was the real prize of that game.
That's a squash rivalry. That was the real prize. Yeah, good.
Yeah. So that one was a fun one. Certainly a fun one to win. A couple other folks who. One guy, Edgar, not the Edgar who we currently see at the club a lot, different Edgar, slow played intentionally one time. Like actually was going down to throw his last shot, looked at the clock, turned back around and talked for another couple minutes to get us past a point. So certainly that was a bit of a rivalry. We can ask Steph about how she feels about Edgar at some point too. Probably not on the mic, but yeah, so a few like that, but nothing super contentious, I would say. Just yeah, and when you look around the teams that we play regularly now, yeah, there's a couple that I always want to win against, as you said, Scott. But for me, it's mostly because those teams play slow, and I want to show them that playing fast can still mean playing well.
Yeah, yes, it very much can. Very much can. Maybe, Sean, one day we'll have, we should do a show about best teammates we've ever had throughout the years. Or most interesting teammates anyway. I've got a few stories from out west, but a lot of fun to talk curling. And hopefully when you meet your rivals out there, for the listeners, you'll have a good competitive game and it won't devolve into fisticuffs.
Hopefully not. Like, we're talking good-natured rivalries.
Yes.
Hopefully. So yeah, mark that one down. Maybe that's good for a summer season episode.
Yeah.
So we'll mark that one down. You want to hear it? Do subscribe. Follow along with us through the rest of the curling season. We love it when we get to those summer episodes, but we got a lot of business to attend to before then, with the season of champions in full swing here. So we'll be back with you next week talking some Scotties. Little preview coming up. Favorite time of the year for curling. The Scotties is my favorite event on the curling calendar. So very excited to talk about the 18 teams who will be out there in Calgary. So do join us for that. But until we chat then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that insert.
Make the final.